December 12, 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains blanketing the scarred landscape in pristine white as Sergeant Thomas Hayes of the 28th Infantry Division huddled in his canvas tent, the temperature dropping well below freezing. His regiment had been positioned along what Allied command considered a quiet sector, perfect for rest and recuperation after months of grueling combat. The exhausted men believed they were finally catching a much-needed break from the intensity of the front lines. Little did they know that in 3 days, this tranquil forest would become the epicenter of one of the most desperate German offensives of the entire conflict. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how a simple act of compassion during the harshest winter of the European campaign would transform the lives of two strangers caught in the machinery of global conflict, challenging everything they believed about the enemy and revealing how humanity could persist even in history's darkest hour. The men of Company B had been positioned along a 5-mile stretch of dense forest, their foxholes and tents spread thin across terrain that Allied command considered low priority. Intelligence reports indicated minimal enemy activity in the sector, which explained the relaxed atmosphere that had settled over the American lines. Supply deliveries had become sporadic, with priority given to units engaged in active operations. For Sergeant Hayes and his men, this meant limited rations, insufficient winter clothing, and dwindling medical supplies. "At least we're not getting shelled every 5 minutes," Hayes told his platoon as they gathered around a small fire, carefully shielded to prevent enemy observation. "Command says we'll be rotating back to France after the new year. Think of it, boys. Hot food, dry beds, and maybe even a shower." Private James Wilson snorted, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I'll believe it when I see it, Sarge. Remember what they promised us in Hürtgen? A 3-day operation, they said. We were there for 3 weeks. Hayes couldn't argue with that assessment. The battle for Hürtgen Forest had been a nightmare, claiming thousands of American lives and leaving the survivors shell-shocked and exhausted. The memory of it still haunted him, the constant artillery barrages, the trees exploding into deadly wooden shrapnel, the screams of wounded men calling for medics who never came. "This is different," Hayes insisted, more for his own benefit than for his men. "We're just holding the line while the main push happens up north. This whole sector is quiet." Lieutenant Robert Parker approached the group, his youthful face belying the responsibility he carried as platoon leader. At 23, Parker was one of the many hastily commissioned officers sent to replace the staggering number of casualties among leadership ranks. "Sergeant Hayes," Parker said, his voice low. "Captain wants a word." Hayes followed the lieutenant to the command tent, where Captain Frank Miller was studying a map by lantern light. Miller had been with the division since North Africa, and the campaigns had etched deep lines into his weathered face. "Hayes," Miller acknowledged without looking up. "I'm sending your squad on a patrol tomorrow. 0600 hours. We've had reports of movement in the eastern sector, probably just local civilians. But command wants us to check it out." Hayes frowned. "Sir, my men have been on rotation for 3 days straight. Wilson's feet are showing early signs of trench foot, and Ramirez still hasn't recovered from that fever." Miller's expression softened slightly. "I know, Tom, but everyone's stretched thin. I've got 2 squads down with influenza and not enough replacements. I need your experienced eyes out there." Hayes nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir, we'll be ready." That night, as snow continued to fall, Hayes sat alone in his tent, writing a letter to his wife, Margaret, back in Pennsylvania. They had married just 2 weeks before his deployment, barely enough time to start a life together before the war pulled them apart. "The forest reminds me of our camping trip to the Alleghenies," he wrote, choosing words that would pass the censors while still conveying something personal. "The same tall pines and quiet nights. I think of you whenever I look up at the stars, though they seem colder here somehow. The men are in good spirits and we're hopeful for a rotation soon." He paused, pen hovering over the paper. He couldn't tell her about the constant fear, the dwindling supplies, or the rumors of a major German build-up across the border. Instead, he asked about her teaching job and her parents, creating a facade of normalcy that seemed increasingly distant from his reality. The sound of movement outside his tent interrupted his thoughts. Hayes set down his letter and reached for his sidearm, a Colt 1911 that had accompanied him across 2 continents. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice sharp with tension. No answer came, but the rustling continued. Hayes cautiously pushed aside the tent flap, his firearm ready. The bitter cold hit him immediately as he peered into the darkness. At first he saw nothing but swirling snow. Then, a shadow moved against the white backdrop, a figure struggling through the deep drifts, hunched against the wind. Hayes raised his firearm. "Halt! Identify yourself." The figure froze, then slowly turned toward him. To Hayes's surprise, it was a woman. She wore a tattered civilian coat over what appeared to be some kind of uniform, her dark hair partially covered by a woolen scarf. Her face was pale with exhaustion and cold, her lips blue from exposure. "Help," she managed in accented English, before collapsing into the snow. Hayes hesitated only briefly before rushing to her side. The war had taught him caution. German infiltrators had been known to disguise themselves as civilians, but he couldn't leave anyone to freeze to death, regardless of potential risk. He holstered his weapon and lifted the unconscious woman, carrying her into the relative warmth of his tent. Under the lantern light, Hayes could see that she was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with features suggesting Eastern European heritage. Her hands were raw from cold and her breathing was shallow. Hayes quickly wrapped her in his spare blanket and moved her close to the small stove that provided the tent's minimal heat. Protocol dictated that he should report the civilian immediately to command, but something made him pause. The woman was clearly in need of medical attention, and at this hour, the overworked medics would likely just place her in the already crowded aid station with minimal treatment. Hayes decided he would let her warm up first, and then report her presence at first light. He managed to coax some water between her lips, and gradually the woman's breathing steadied. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a startling blue that contrasted with her dark hair. For a moment, confusion clouded her features, then fear as she realized she was in an American tent. "You're safe," Hayes said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I found you in the snow. You need to warm up." The woman tried to speak, coughed, and then tried again. "Thank you," she said in careful English. "I was lost." "What's your name?" Hayes asked. "What are you doing out here?" "This is a military zone." She hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "My name is Sophia Nowak. I am Polish. I was displaced. Many of us were taken for work." Hayes had heard about the forced labor programs implemented across occupied territories. Millions of civilians had been relocated to serve German industries, their lives disrupted and families scattered. If this woman had escaped such a fate, she had likely been through significant hardship. "You're far from Poland," Hayes observed, offering her a tin cup of watery coffee from his thermos. Sophia accepted it gratefully, her hands still trembling. "We go where we must to survive." She took a careful sip. "You are kind to help me. Others might not." Hayes shrugged. Anyone would do the same. A sad smile crossed her face. "No, Sergeant, not anyone." Hayes noticed she had identified his rank without him mentioning it, but before he could question her further, exhaustion overtook her. Sophia's eyes drifted closed, her body finally surrendering to the warmth and relative safety of the tent. For several minutes, Hayes simply watched her sleep, trying to decide the best course of action. Something about her story didn't quite add up. How had a Polish forced laborer ended up alone in the Ardennes, miles from any settlement? But the weariness etched into her face was genuine, as was the relief when he had offered sanctuary rather than suspicion. Hayes returned to his letter, adding a vague postscript about encountering locals affected by the conflict. Then he arranged his bedroll on the opposite side of the tent, maintaining a respectful distance from his unexpected guest, and tried to get some rest before the early patrol. Morning came with a heavy fog that reduced visibility to mere yards, making the planned patrol both more difficult and more necessary. Hayes woke before dawn and found Sophia already awake, sitting with her back straight and eyes alert despite her ordeal. "I must go," she said immediately. "I have caused you enough trouble." Hayes shook his head. You'll freeze out there, and there might be patrols, ours or theirs. I need to report your presence to my commanding officer. Fear flickered across her features. Please no, I just need to continue west, to Allied territory. This is Allied territory, Hayes pointed out. You're already behind American lines. Sophia seemed to weigh her words carefully. There are complications. People looking for me. Before Hayes could press further, the tent flap opened, and Private Wilson stuck his head in. His eyes widened at the sight of Sophia. Sarge, the patrol is... He stopped mid-sentence, clearly shocked. Who's this? Hayes made a quick decision. A refugee I found last night, nearly frozen to death. Wilson, I need you to take over the patrol. I'm going to escort her to Captain Miller. Wilson frowned, his gaze lingering suspiciously on Sophia. Are you sure that's wise, Sarge? We don't know... That's an order, Wilson, Hayes interrupted firmly. Brief Ramirez and take point. Standard patrol pattern, no risks. Report anything unusual immediately. After Wilson reluctantly departed, Hayes turned back to Sophia. I'm sorry, but I have to follow protocol. Captain Miller is a decent man. He'll ensure you're treated fairly. Sophia stood shakily. Your captain will have questions I cannot answer. Not yet. Then why should I trust you? Hayes asked directly. Sophia met his gaze without flinching. Because I am trusting you with my life, Sergeant Hayes, and because we both want the same thing, for this terrible conflict to end. There was something in her eyes, a depth of experience that went beyond civilian hardship. Hayes had seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers who had witnessed too much. You're not just a refugee, are you? He asked quietly. Sophia sighed. No, but the less you know, the safer you are. Hayes considered his options. His duty was clear, report the civilian presence to command. Yet his instincts told him Sophia's situation was complicated in ways that military bureaucracy might not handle appropriately. I have to lead a patrol, he said finally. Stay here. Rest. When I return, we'll figure out what to do. Relief visibly washed over Sophia. Thank you, Thomas. Hayes paused at the tent flap, struck by her use of his first name. I don't recall telling you my first name. A small smile crossed Sophia's face. It's on your footlocker. Hayes nodded, somewhat reassured by the simple explanation, and headed out to join his patrol. The fog made the forest eerily quiet, muffling sounds and transforming familiar landmarks into ghostly silhouettes. Hayes led his squad through predetermined checkpoints, alert for any signs of enemy activity. His thoughts, however, kept returning to the mysterious woman in his tent. Private Ramirez moved up beside him. Sarge, Wilson told me about the woman. You sure about this? Hayes kept his eyes on the tree line. Not entirely. But I wasn't going to leave her to die. Of course not, Ramirez agreed. But it's strange, no? A woman alone this close to the front. Maybe she's a spy. The thought had occurred to Hayes as well, but something about Sophia's manner didn't fit that profile. If she is, she's not very good at it. Walking around in a snowstorm until she collapses isn't exactly covert infiltration. The patrol continued uneventfully until they reached the easternmost boundary of their sector. There, Hayes spotted something that made him signal for the squad to take cover. Fresh tracks in the snow, leading from the German lines. Multiple individuals, Hayes whispered to Ramirez, moving in formation. Military, not civilian. Ramirez nodded grimly. Scout patrol. Maybe. Hayes replied, studying the direction of the tracks. Or something worse, they're heading straight for our position. The implications were troubling. This sector was supposed to be quiet, yet here was evidence of German reconnaissance. Potentially, it could signify preparation for a larger operation. Hayes made another decision that went against protocol. Instead of following the tracks to gather more intelligence, he ordered an immediate return to base camp. But Sarge, Wilson protested, shouldn't we see where they're going? Our job is to report, not engage, Hayes said firmly. Something's happening, and command needs to know now. The return journey was tense, with every man scanning the forest for signs of enemy presence. Hayes couldn't shake the feeling of connection between the German patrol and Sophia's appearance, though he had no evidence beyond coincidence and timing. When they reached the camp, Hayes was surprised to find unusual activity. Trucks were arriving, loaded with supplies and fresh troops. Something had changed while they were on patrol. Captain Miller intercepted them before they could report. Hayes, good timing. Situation's developing. Intelligence reports massive German buildup across the border. We're reinforcing positions and preparing for potential action. Hayes felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December cold. Sir, we found tracks. German patrol, small unit headed west through our sector. Miller's expression darkened. Confirms what we've been hearing. This quiet sector is about to get very loud. He lowered his voice. There's something else. Counterintelligence is here. They're looking for an escaped prisoner, a high-value target who might have crossed into our lines last night. Hayes felt his stomach tighten. What kind of high-value target? They're being tight-lipped, Miller replied. But word is it's a German intelligence officer with critical information, apparently slipped away during a transfer. There's a whole team dedicated to finding this person. Hayes maintained a neutral expression, though his mind was racing. I'll keep my men alert, sir. Do that, Miller said. And Hayes, report anything unusual, anything at all. Hayes returned to his tent with a growing sense of unease, wondering what he would find or not find when he arrived. To his surprise, Sophia was still there, sitting exactly where he had left her, though now she was studying a book she must have found among his belongings. Hemingway, she said, holding up For Whom the Bell Tolls. You have good taste in literature, Sergeant. Hayes secured the tent flap behind him. There are counterintelligence officers in camp, looking for an escaped German officer who crossed our lines last night. Sophia closed the book carefully. I see. Is that you? Hayes asked directly. Are you German intelligence? For a long moment, Sophia said nothing. Then she sighed. No, but they think I am. Explain, Hayes demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. Sophia noticed the gesture but didn't seem alarmed. I was a nurse with the Polish resistance. 6 months ago, I was captured during an operation in Warsaw. Because I speak fluent German and had access to resistance networks, they believed I was more valuable for intelligence than as a nurse. I was transferred between interrogation centers, eventually ending up at a facility near the border. Hayes listened skeptically. And you escaped? 3 days ago, Sophia confirmed. During a transfer, the vehicle was attacked by aircraft, your aircraft. In the confusion, I managed to get away. I've been moving west ever since, trying to reach Allied lines. Why not identify yourself once you reached our position? Why the secrecy? Sophia's expression hardened. Because I don't know who to trust. The Germans had informants embedded with the Americans. That's how several of our operations were compromised. I needed to assess the situation before revealing myself. The story was plausible, but Hayes had been in the war long enough to become cautious. If you're a nurse, prove it. What's the treatment for traumatic pneumothorax? Without hesitation, Sophia replied, chest tube insertion between the 4th and 5th intercostal space, mid-axillary line. Apply petroleum gauge around insertion site, secure with adhesive tape, connect to underwater seal drainage system. Hayes blinked, impressed despite his suspicion. That could be memorized. Ask me anything, Sophia challenged. About wound care, triage protocols, emergency surgeries. I've performed them all under conditions you cannot imagine. Something in her tone convinced Hayes more than her words. It carried the weight of genuine experience, the kind that couldn't be fabricated. So why are they so intent on finding you? Hayes asked. What makes you special enough for counterintelligence to be involved? Sophia hesitated. During my captivity, I was forced to work in the infirmary. The facility treated high-ranking officers, including those involved in planning upcoming operations. I overheard things, saw documents, information that could be valuable to your commanders. Such as, Sophia lowered her voice, a major offensive is coming. Soon. The Germans are massing forces for a surprise attack through the Ardennes. They believe this sector is your weakest point. Undermanned, undersupplied, and complacent. They plan to drive a wedge between your forces and push all the way to Antwerp. Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. Her words aligned perfectly with the tracks they'd found, the sudden reinforcement of their position, and the intelligence reports Captain Miller had mentioned. I need to report this, Hayes said, moving toward the tent flap. Sophia caught his arm. Wait. If you take me to your intelligence officers now, I'll be just another source, another report in a system already processing dozens of warnings. Many won't be taken seriously. What's your alternative? Hayes asked. I have names, dates, specific unit designations, Sophia explained, but more importantly, I have this. She reached into her coat and withdrew a small folded document. Operational orders signed by Field Marshal Model himself, taken from the desk of an officer who was too careless with his briefcase while I changed his bandages. Hayes stared at the document, its official stamps and signatures clearly visible even though he couldn't read the German text. If genuine, it was intelligence gold, direct confirmation of enemy plans. This needs to go up the chain immediately, Hayes insisted. Lives depend on it. Sophia nodded. Yes, but I need your help to ensure it reaches someone who will act on it, not just file it away as another unconfirmed report. The request placed Hayes in an impossible position. Military protocol was clear, yet bureaucracy could indeed bury critical information. He had seen it happen before, warnings ignored, intelligence dismissed, with catastrophic consequences. There's a colonel from 2nd Division headquarters visiting the camp, Hayes said after a moment's thought. Colonel Richards. He has direct access to General Middleton. If anyone can ensure this information reaches the right people, it's him. Sophia considered this. Can you arrange a meeting without alerting your counterintelligence friends? It's risky, Hayes acknowledged. If you're not who you say you are, then you'll have made a terrible mistake. Sophia finished for him. I understand, but consider the alternative. If I am telling the truth and this information doesn't reach your commanders in time. The weight of the decision pressed on Hayes. His military training demanded he follow protocol, but his experience in combat had taught him that sometimes initiative saved more lives than obedience. I'll arrange it, he decided. But you'll have to trust me completely. Follow my instructions exactly, no questions asked. Sophia nodded solemnly. I've trusted you with my life already, Thomas. I won't stop now. As darkness fell across the camp, Hayes put his plan into motion. Using his sergeant's authority, he requisitioned a jeep for urgent supply retrieval and secured winter gear for Sophia, standard-issue items that would help her blend in with the support personnel. Keep your head down, Hayes instructed as they approached the vehicle. If anyone speaks to you, you're Private Jenkins, a replacement driver assigned to my detail. Don't speak unless absolutely necessary. Sophia nodded, adjusting the oversized helmet that partially obscured her features. The camp was busy with preparation activities, new defensive positions being established, ammunition being distributed, communications lines being laid. The atmosphere had changed dramatically from the relaxed sector Hayes had known just days before. They drove through the camp perimeter with minimal scrutiny, the guard merely checking Hayes's authorization before waving them through. The headquarters where Colonel Richards was staying lay 5 miles west, close enough to the front for effective command, far enough to remain relatively secure. As they drove through the dark forest, Sophia broke the silence. Your men respect you greatly. I could see it in how they defer to you. Hayes kept his eyes on the narrow, snow-covered road. They're good soldiers. Most of them didn't ask for this fight, but they're doing their duty. And you? Sophia asked. Did you ask for this fight? Hayes considered the question. I enlisted after Pearl Harbor. Seemed like the right thing to do. Noble, Sophia observed without irony. I sometimes wonder if nobility is a luxury only the unoccupied can afford. Meaning, in Poland there was no choice, Sophia explained. When they came, we either resisted or accepted. There was no middle ground, no neutral position. The resistance wasn't about nobility or righteousness, it was about survival. Hayes glanced at her profile. Illuminated intermittently by moonlight filtering through the trees. Is that why you became a nurse? Survival? A small smile crossed Sophia's face. No. That decision came long before the war. I always wanted to help people. The irony is that I've probably seen more death as a nurse than many soldiers. They lapsed into silence again, each lost in private thoughts. The headlights illuminated swirling snowflakes, creating a hypnotic pattern against the darkness. I had a fiancé, Sophia said suddenly. Marek. He was a professor of history at the University of Warsaw. They took him in the first round of arrests. Intellectuals were always primary targets. Her voice remained steady, though Hayes noticed her hands tightening in her lap. I never learned what happened to him. Hayes didn't know how to respond. What comfort could he possibly offer for such loss? I'm sorry, he said finally, the words feeling woefully inadequate. Sophia turned to look at him directly. This is why your kindness meant so much to me, Thomas. In a world where cruelty has become routine, simple humanity feels revolutionary. Before Hayes could respond, headlights appeared ahead, a vehicle approaching on the narrow road. Hayes slowed the jeep, alert for potential trouble. Military police, he murmured, as the other vehicle drew closer. Stay calm. The MP jeep flashed its lights, signaling for them to stop. Hayes complied, putting on his most authoritative expression as an officer approached their vehicle. Sergeant, the MP lieutenant said, shining a flashlight into the jeep. Identification and travel orders, please. Hayes produced his papers. Sergeant Thomas Hayes, 28th Infantry, transporting supplies back to Company B. The lieutenant examined the documents, then directed his flashlight toward Sophia. And your passenger? Private Jenkins, Hayes replied smoothly. New transfer. Still getting his paperwork processed, but I needed an extra driver for the supply run. The lieutenant's flashlight lingered on Sophia, who kept her head slightly down, face partially obscured by the helmet and collar of her coat. Looking a bit young for a transfer, the lieutenant remarked. Let's see your temporary ID, Private. Hayes intervened before Sophia could respond. Is there a problem, Lieutenant? We're on urgent supply detail for a frontline company. Captain Miller will be asking questions if we're delayed. The lieutenant hesitated, then switched tactics. Actually, we're looking for someone. An escaped prisoner came through this area last night. German intelligence officer. Seen anyone unusual on the roads? No, sir, Hayes replied. Just supply convoys and reinforcements heading east. After a tense moment, the lieutenant handed back Hayes's papers. All right, Sergeant, proceed. But keep your eyes open. This prisoner is considered extremely dangerous. Will do, sir, Hayes assured him, trying not to show his relief as the lieutenant returned to his vehicle. As they continued their journey, Sophia released a shaky breath. That was close. Too close, Hayes agreed. And it complicates things. If they're already searching the roads, we need to move faster, Sophia concluded. When they reached the headquarters compound, Hayes faced another challenge. As a non-commissioned officer from a different division, gaining access to Colonel Richards would require finesse and possibly some creative storytelling. Wait here, Hayes instructed, parking the jeep in a supply area where Sophia would attract minimal attention. I'll try to arrange the meeting. The headquarters was housed in a requisitioned Belgian farmhouse, its stone walls providing better protection than the canvas tents most units relied upon. Hayes approached the entrance with confident strides, saluting the guards and presenting himself at the operations desk. Sergeant Thomas Hayes, 28th Infantry, Company B, he informed the duty officer. I need to speak with Colonel Richards regarding time-sensitive intelligence from our forward positions. The captain behind the desk regarded him skeptically. The colonel is in conference. Any intelligence report should go through proper channels, Sergeant. Hayes leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sir, with respect, this information cannot wait for channels. It concerns an imminent offensive. Our patrol intercepted communications suggesting a major attack within 48 hours. The captain's expression changed. Wait here. He disappeared through a door, returning moments later. The colonel will see you, 5 minutes only. Colonel Richards was a career officer with a reputation for competence and little patience for protocol when it interfered with operational effectiveness. He looked up from a map table as Hayes entered, several other officers pausing their discussion. Sergeant Hayes, Richards acknowledged, I understand you have time-sensitive intelligence. Make it quick. Hayes straightened to attention. Sir, my patrol has encountered evidence of significant enemy movement along our sector. We've also intercepted a source with detailed information about an imminent major offensive through the Ardennes. Richards raised an eyebrow. Intercepted a source? Yes, sir. A Polish resistance operative recently escaped from German custody. She has documentation, Operational orders signed by Field Marshal Model detailing attack plans. The room fell silent, all eyes now focused on Hayes. "Where is this source now?" Richards asked carefully. "Outside, sir, in my transport." Richards exchanged glances with his staff, then nodded. "Bring her in, discreetly." Hayes returned to the jeep, finding Sophia exactly where he had left her, though her posture was tense, eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. "They'll see you," Hayes informed her, "the colonel himself." Relief washed over Sophia's features. "Thank you, Thomas." As they walked toward the headquarters, Hayes felt a strange mixture of emotions: pride at having potentially facilitated critical intelligence transfer, worry about the consequences if Sophia proved untrustworthy, and an unexpected sense of impending loss. Their brief connection, formed under extraordinary circumstances, would soon end as military machinery took over. Inside, Colonel Richards dismissed his junior staff, leaving only himself, his intelligence officer, and a Signal Corps major in the room with Hayes and Sophia. "You claim to have information about an imminent offensive," Richards said without preamble. "Let's hear it." Sophia removed her helmet, standing straight despite her obvious exhaustion. "Colonel, the Germans are preparing a major attack through the Ardennes beginning December 16th. The assault will involve 2 panzer armies and 1 infantry army, approximately 200,000 men and nearly 1,000 tanks." The intelligence officer scoffed. "Impossible. They don't have the resources for an operation of that scale, not after their losses in France and the Eastern Front." Sophia withdrew the folded document from her coat, placing it carefully on the map table. "This is the operational order, signed by Field Marshal Model, detailing the initial phase of the attack. The objective is Antwerp, with the Americans as the primary target due to perceived inexperience and thin defensive lines in the Ardennes sector." The colonel studied the document, his expression grave. "Major Winters, your assessment?" The intelligence officer examined the papers. "The document appears authentic, sir. Proper stamps, signatures consistent with known examples." He looked up at Sophia with newfound respect. "How did you obtain this?" "I was a nurse with the Polish resistance," Sophia explained. "Captured and forced to work in a medical facility treating German officers. One of my patients was careless with his briefcase while I was changing his bandages." Colonel Richards turned to Hayes. "Sergeant, wait outside, please." Hayes hesitated, reluctant to leave Sophia alone, but military discipline prevailed. "Yes, sir." For nearly an hour, Hayes waited in the antechamber, wondering what was transpiring behind closed doors. Had Sophia's information been believed? Would it make a difference in time? Finally, the door opened. Colonel Richards emerged with Sophia, now looking even more exhausted but somehow lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. "Sergeant Hayes," Richards said, "your actions in bringing this information forward were commendable, if somewhat unorthodox. A full debriefing will follow, but for now I'm authorizing you to return to your unit. Miss Nowak will remain here for further consultation with our intelligence division." Hayes nodded, though he felt an unexpected pang at the abrupt conclusion of his role in Sophia's journey. Sophia stepped forward. "Colonel, if I may have a moment to thank Sergeant Hayes properly." Richards nodded curtly. "1 minute." When they were relatively alone, Sophia took Hayes's hands in hers. "You saved my life, Thomas, and perhaps many others by helping me deliver this warning." "Will it make a difference?" Hayes asked. "Colonel Richards believes so. He's already sending communications to headquarters and alerting adjacent units." Sophia squeezed his hands. "Some will listen, whether it will be enough." She shrugged, the gesture somehow encompassing all the uncertainty of war. "What happens to you now?" Hayes couldn't help asking. Sophia's smile was tinged with sadness. "I'll be sent to London, most likely. There's a Polish government in exile there. Perhaps I can continue to serve somehow." "And after the war?" The question felt strangely personal, but Hayes couldn't stop himself from asking. "After?" Sophia seemed momentarily confused by the concept. "I haven't thought that far ahead in a very long time." A staff officer appeared at the doorway. "We're ready to depart, Miss Nowak." Sophia nodded, then turned back to Hayes. "I never believed I would find kindness from a stranger in the middle of this conflict. You've given me back something I had lost, hope." She leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. "Survive this, Thomas. Go home to Pennsylvania, to Margaret." Hayes blinked in surprise. "How did you know about—" "Your letter," Sophia explained. "I saw it when you were writing. I apologize for the intrusion." Before Hayes could respond, Sophia was being led away, escorted by intelligence officers who would ensure her safe passage to higher command. Their brief connection, forged in the snow and darkness of the Ardennes winter, was over. The drive back to his unit was solitary and contemplative. Hayes wondered if he would ever learn whether Sophia's warning had made a difference, whether lives had been saved by their chance encounter. 3 days later, on December 16, 1944, the sky over the Ardennes erupted with artillery fire as the massive German offensive began. What would later be called the Battle of the Bulge had commenced, catching many American units by surprise. But not all. Some positions had been reinforced, some units placed on high alert. Some supplies and reserves moved into position, all based on warnings that had filtered through command, including Sophia's intelligence. Sergeant Hayes's company endured the initial bombardment from prepared positions, having been relocated from their previous vulnerable location based on updated intelligence. The fighting was fierce, casualties were high, and the outcome remained uncertain for weeks. But the element of complete surprise that the German command had counted on had been partially compromised. In January 1945, as American forces regained lost ground and the German offensive ultimately failed, Hayes received a letter forwarded through multiple military post offices. It contained no return address, just a simple message in familiar handwriting. "The kindness of strangers can change history. Your country should be proud of men like you. I am in London working with the medical corps here. The world is still dark, but I have not lost hope again. Thank you for sharing your tent with a refugee. SN." Hayes carried the letter through the remaining campaigns of the European theatre, a reminder that even in war's darkest moments, humanity could prevail. He never saw Sophia again, though he sometimes wondered what became of the Polish nurse who had risked everything to deliver a warning. After the war, Hayes returned to Pennsylvania, to Margaret, and to a teaching position at his old high school. He rarely spoke of his wartime experiences, but he kept Sophia's letter in his desk drawer, occasionally taking it out when his students asked why history mattered or how small actions could affect great events. In 1971, while visiting Washington, D.C., Hayes encountered an exhibit at the Smithsonian about intelligence operations during World War II. There, in a glass case, was a familiar document, operational orders signed by Field Marshal Model, with a placard explaining how its interception by Polish resistance had provided crucial warning before the Battle of the Bulge. The document was credited with saving thousands of American lives by allowing partial preparation for the offensive. No mention was made of the nurse who had stolen it or the sergeant who had helped deliver it to Allied intelligence. History rarely records such details, but standing before the exhibit, Hayes smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest contributions come from unexpected sources. An exhausted soldier sharing his tent with a refugee, unaware she carried information that would help shape the course of the war. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.